Hello, dear friends. How are you? I hope you had as nice a Memorial Day weekend as possible under the circumstances. I'm Mark Golub. So happy to be with you on Gam Yachad, together during COVID-19. We had pretty nice weather for most of the holiday weekend. As I've said, a sunny day always makes me feel better. I hope wherever you were throughout the United States, you had good weather as well. And the news continues to be on the good side regarding the coronavirus. The curve is significantly below our hospital's capacity to treat those with the virus. In fact, in my own hometown, the number of cases have dropped to the point that the ICU nurses are actually being sent home. And hospitals are once again doing other procedures, treating people without COVID at all. And secondary medical facilities are scheduled to open June 1st. And it's not just hospitals. All 50 states are slowly implementing plans that will enable more businesses to reopen. I have friends who are actually making appointments at barber shops, in hair salons. Restaurants are beginning to seat customers, especially if they have outdoor facilities. And in New York, Governor Cuomo has announced that he will permit all sport leagues to begin workouts. And people are in fact getting together with social distancing. Families are having meals together, even if they're often outside and they're sitting farther apart than usual. There's even serious talk about a vaccine being ready, maybe as early as October. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, does this mean the threat is over? No. Does this mean that those of us in the vulnerable demographic, 60 or 70 or older, or anyone with a serious underlying precondition, that we can now change our behavior, be less vigilant in sticking to the rules, social distancing, wearing masks, washing our hands, keeping them out of our mouth, nose, and eyes? No, we may not be less vigilant. But if you were really scared back in March and April, feeling as if the virus was stalking you, you can begin to let that fear go. And I hope that during this terribly trying time, JBS has been some comfort to you. And I know it has for many of you, because you've written and told me so. And all of us at JBS are so gratified by your words. We will not leave you. I will be with you. JBS will be with you. And we'll continue to update you with as much information as we possibly can. But there seems to be many causes for optimism. Here, by the way, are the rough virus numbers for May 26, 2020. In the United States, more than 100,000 people have now succumbed to the virus, out of 1.7 million diagnosed cases, though the recovery rate in America is up another 4 percentage points since last Thursday to 27%. In Israel, meanwhile, the story remains extremely strong. Only 2 Israelis have died from the virus since last Thursday. Israel still has fewer than 300 fatalities due to COVID-19. And the recovery rate in Israel went up another 3% and is now more than 85%. 85% of people who contract the virus recover in Israel. And speaking of the success Israel has had containing the virus, I'm so happy to be joined now by JBS Senior Vice President and the former media consul for the Israeli consulate in New York, who can bring us some more information about what's going on in Israel, Shahar Azani. Shahar, it is wonderful to see you. How are you doing, Shahar?
I'm okay, trying to get used to the idea that it's sunny out there, but going out is no longer a given. Going wherever we want, taking a trip, all of this, continuous thought and remembering to take your mask. I went shopping yesterday, and just as I was leaving the house and I thought I had everything with me, it just struck me that, hey, something is missing. Where is your face mask? So I turned back home and thought to myself, what a different reality we live in. But like you said, Mark, seeing the sun outside reminded me of the optimism, which is the best immune system anyone can have. And that's what we should hold on to until this passes, and it shall pass.
It shall pass. And you and I will be with the JBS audience every step of the way, yes?
Absolutely.
By the way, were you able to have a nice Memorial Day weekend with your family?
Oh, yes. It's important when you're home, even though it's a different reality where we can go to the studio, Mark, and engage in this amazing studio we have in Times Square and really enjoy it. But then even when we're home and we do all of this work, like you say, to connect with the audience and update and be together through this period, we have to create our enclaves of privacy and family and, our personal items, because then work gets mixed with personal. And if we don't distinguish, if we don't create areas, even physical areas, where this is where I work, but now I'm moving here and I'm going to take the time and make sure that even though, you and I know it very well, we can work 26 hours a day. But
Absolutely.
we have to take some time. And now we're going to sit together. Now we're going to be with the family. Now we're going to go outside and have a great barbecue in the yard. It's important to make that distinction.
Good for you. All right, so Shahar, what can you tell us about Israel's plan, what Israel plans to do about ending its lockdown? And that lockdown in Israel was pretty extreme. Where do things stand in terms of the coronavirus in Israel right now?
Well, first of all, like you mentioned, Mark, Israel is on its way out, and so is the feeling within many members of the general public. There is a requirement to put in a face mask, but remember this, the heat in Israel, and only last week there was a terrible heat wave, could sometimes be unbearable. So how do you cope with having a regular class at school where the air condition is not necessarily working because you want the windows open to allow for fresh air circulation, and then you're asking the students to put on the face mask? So we are at the phase of adjustment on various levels. First of all, it's the social adjustment. Most of all, it's the economic adjustment. A lot of businesses have not been able to come back from the disease. A lot of businesses have, especially, the middle classes, small businesses, small restaurants, kiosks are having difficulties bouncing back. The government is doing, and now that we have a government, is doing what's possible to assist as much as we can, but it's very tough, and I think it's a preamble to what we may see here in the United States as far as recuperating from this terrible crisis.
Yes.
And there are two interesting developments. One is when it comes to flights, when you ask yourself, can I go to Israel now? So first, very slow resumption. There are few flights that are going to resume in the month of June. But at this point in time, Americans, for instance, or tourists are not allowed to enter Israel. But if you're an Israeli, you're allowed to enter Israel. And even so, you have to go into quarantine for 14 days. Now, let me just say this for the benefit of our viewers to understand what Israeli quarantine means. I have a friend who traveled to Israel about 2 weeks ago. If you ask him, he'll tell you 2 weeks minus 2 days. Why does he know so well? Because as soon as you enter Israel, the requirement is very stiff. You have to stay indoors, not a yard outside. You put your garbage outside, somebody else takes it. You want food, delivery to your door. Police comes to his place twice a day, asking him to confirm that he is indeed inside the apartment. At some point, there will be a drone coming in with a camera asking him to show the ID. So when Israel says quarantine, It is quarantine. And I guess that's part of the reason why Israel is where it is.
Yes. Have people complained about it? A lot of people are complaining in America.
Yeah. Well, you want to know that, of course, there have been. Israelis are not known to be extremely timid or shy of authority, whether it's confronting cops but mostly there was an understanding of what needed to be done. But then there is a limit, right? You can do so up to a certain point. It's not endless, the kind of patience and economic patience. But since Israel came down hard on the situation from the very beginning, they're able to reap some of the benefits. They're already talking about resumption of flights beyond June. What am I talking about? Actual tourism. So they had a tour of the Ben Gurion International Airport a couple of days ago. And as of mid-July, they're expecting a significant resumption of dozens of flights into Israel. They have designated some of the countries in the world to be green and red. Green is similar to Israel, countries that are able to start resuming normal life, as much as normal is a word now. And red is us, is where we are at an early stage of coming out of this crisis. Countries that have been designated green would be Greece or Cyprus, Malta, and they've signed agreements between them that allow for tourism in between them during the summer vacation, which is an economic move and a social move. And of course, under stipulations of check your temperature and make sure that you didn't go through any of the red states and all of that. So this is on the flight scene. When it comes to restaurants, I believe tomorrow they're reopening in Israel under all of the requirements of what Israel calls the purple badge. The purple badge was issued by the Israeli Ministry of Health to give you all of the stipulations and limitations of what you need to do. So are you allowed to have to go to a buffet? Yes, of course, as long as you're not the one touching the food. It can only be served to you. And this is the distance. And what happens when somebody does not follow the rules? What can you do? It's still very gray area because there has to be legislation to give the police powers to do something. So, but you can definitely see movement going forward. And there is a lot to learn following Israel to understand what we may face here.
Absolutely. One last question. The schools have reopened. Setting aside the problem of air conditioning and heat, which could be true other times as well, although obviously we want the windows to be open now more than we might in general times. But are parents comfortable right now sending their children to school in Israel?
So, Mark, at the beginning, some of the parents, about 30% of the parents were a bit apprehensive as to taking that step. But everybody understands that in order for the market to move forward, for the parents to be able to go back to work, schools are a necessity for the economy and for the kids, really. You know, I can share with you the feelings in my extended family of my nephews and nieces when they went back to school. It felt like it was September 1st. You know, they're coming back. They were very excited to see their friends again and having to adjust to that reality. Now, yes, schools have resumed. People feel much more comfortable, and there is a high level of alert. That is to say that earlier today, a student was diagnosed in a high school with the coronavirus. The entire school, students and staff, went into quarantine for 14 days. Immediately. No games played. If a certain student in a classroom was diagnosed, not only did his class and teachers who were in touch with him, but his family, just to be safe, they're all home. So they're very alert to any suspicion of, resumption of this terrible, terrible virus. But at the same time, there is a great drive to move forward because we understand the show must go on. The economy has to resume.
Absolutely.
People must live under whatever circumstances. We have to make this work. Israeli resiliency is nothing new.
Right. All right, Shahar, so let's talk for a few minutes about the current political machinations going on in Israel today. We know that the trial of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on multiple counts of fraud, breach of trust, and bribery have actually gone forward. And they started last week with the Prime Minister present in the courtroom, mask and all. Tell us where things stand now.
Well, big day, Mark. You saw the pictures from the court on Sunday. For the first time, a presiding Israeli prime minister, incumbent premier, appears before the district court in Jerusalem, answering indictments and accusations, like you said, on bribery and breach of trust. This is unheard of in the Israeli political scene and in Israeli public life. I can also mention that you can see a heightened attention by the international community and the international press as to the situation. Now, what does that mean? Did you see the picture, Mark, where the prime minister was in the court hall itself, taking a selfie along with the major Likud ministers? One of the best, where he took a selfie with his main ministers, members of Likud, kind of stating, "Here I am." And it was an amazing visual. Outside the courtroom, there was a video of him speaking with a group of Holocaust survivors who came to support him. Outside of the court, there were demonstrations and counter demonstrations. One of those who support him and wave the flag of Israel, and others who call against corruption and for his. It was an amazing moment. I can tell you that the prime minister tried to, through his lawyers, submit a request to the court not to be present at the opening of his trial. He stated security issues and heightened costs, and the court said, "You don't worry about the costs, just come here and answer the indictments." So they made a point, and I can imagine as soon as he heard that, you saw the entire arena getting prepped from every possible angle for his arrival. Now, what's important to remember is you mentioned several indictments. So let's just remind ourselves, what are the indictments? So we're talking about three main indictments. The first one would be what we call the gifts. Gifts that the prime minister received from rich business people like Arnon Milchan in Hollywood and others, that included cigars and champagne and jewelry to his wife and his family and himself and his son. So the Attorney General in Israel estimates this to be at around $750,000 worth of gifts. Is this appropriate? Is this bribery? Was it a quid pro quo? The second element...
Hold it. Let's take it one at a time.
Yeah.
Netanyahu insists these were expressions of friendship and there was no quid pro quo. In Israel, to what extent are people upset that he was getting champagne and cigars?
Well, it's very simple. It goes exactly through the fraction line of the last three elections in Israel. The part of the public that supports Netanyahu says, what's the big deal? Netanyahu is an amazing leader. We are lucky to have him. So he loves cigars and his wife loves champagne. What's wrong with that? We need to let them enjoy life so they have rich friends. If it were you and I, maybe we'd exchange bagels. But these guys, they exchange cigars and champagne. On the other hand, the Attorney General and a big chunk of the Israeli public will come and say, hey, $750,000 is no chop change. In addition, it's not just gift exchange. There were sometimes demands by the couple to receive certain items like jewelry and other things. There was an expectation that it will be given. So it's a lot of, there has been some indecencies in the case.
Wait, what was the quid pro quo here? What did Netanyahu promise to give Milchan and others?
Well, if I quote from the court documents, I can say, for example, that when Arnon Milchan needed something to do with his work permit in the U.S. with the extension of his visa, if A and B may apply to the U.S. Embassy for the documents, Milchan picked up the phone and asked the Prime Minister to make a phone call to somebody he knew at the Department of State by the name of John Kerry to take care of the visa, and that was taken care of. So that was one example, but the indictment tells a story of several such incidents where there was some sort of a quid pro quo. So you're talking about what we call the gifts indictment. It's all wrapped into
Okay,
this.
we're going to go on to the other two indictments. I'm so glad you're doing this. But what you said was, I said to you, do people care about cigars or champagne? Your answer was, Mark, it breaks down on partisan lines, very much like what we see happening in America. vis-a-vis American reaction to whatever Donald Trump is charged with. Are you saying that in essence, Israel is fractured in a similar way to the way America is fractured when it comes to charges against the prime minister?
Very much so, up to a point where if a decade or 2 decades ago, Israel's political lines ran through secular and religious. You remember those times, Mark, right?
Of course.
Secular and religious, right and left, settlers versus leftists, peace versus war, or settlement, whichever way you want to define it. Nowadays, when you look into the politicians and their statements, it's whether I support Bibi or I don't support Bibi. Because look at Benny Gantz, who is now part of the government. When you look into his politics of right-left, he's very much similar to Likud. Even Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid, his policies are very similar politically to those of Likud, and even economically. And he was part of that government only in 2013. So yes, it's many a time it's focusing on the person, on Benjamin Netanyahu, and that is an unbelievable phenomenon in Israeli politics, which leads you to think, what is going to happen once the inevitable happens and he moves on and he's no longer part of the political scene? Israel is going to have to go through serious rehabilitation, whatever happens. It's going to be an interesting process.
Fascinating. All right, go to charge 2,000.
So from the 1,000 of the gifts, we're talking about 2,000. What happens when there is an exchange between a publisher of the leading paper in Israel and the prime minister, in which the prime minister says, I'm going to give you a hand and maybe put some limitations on your competition. By the way, by saying competition, I say Sheldon Adelson's newspaper, Israel Hayom. Think about that political alliance and what Sheldon must have felt reading the transcripts of those conversations. And then the editor of the paper says, I'm going to lay off of you a little bit, and that helps. So I'm going to push through a bill that will put limitations on Israel Hayom, and in exchange, you're not going to give me such a hard time on Yediot Aharonot. Now, there is a question here. Is this normal in politics, or is it bribery? Was it something here that was improper in the relationship between a politician and the news media? Those who support Netanyahu will say this is something politicians have done for ages, exchanging favors with media outlets. I mean, they will claim that look at Yair Lapid and Tzipi Livni. They were promoting a bill to put out Israel Hayom to support Yediot Aharonot, while Yediot Aharonot was covering them favorably continuously. So maybe that's bribery, and maybe you should bring them before the court. And on the other hand, you will see others who will say, no. This was explicit quid pro quo. This was using your elected power in order to give them favor that translates to money and economy. It's not just a matter of coverage, because once you reduce the distribution of Israel Hayom, that means more money into the pocket of Yediot Aharonot from ads, from acquiring the paper itself. So this is a tough question because it's never been dealt with, like Alan Dershowitz said, on the world stage. The relationship between media and politics, and whether you can adjudicate that relationship, whether it's part of the justice system. There is a question here on this issue, whether you like Netanyahu or not. This is a precedent, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the court treats this super sensitive issue.
Absolutely. But we should mention Netanyahu claims nothing ever came of that meeting. There was no legislation. There was no attempt. There was no actual attempt to restrict Israel Hayom, and that is his defense.
Breach of trust.
Yes.
That's why it's breach of trust. It hasn't matured into bribery. Can I whisper something in your ear, Mark?
Yes.
So I just want to tell you one of the funny things of how this story even came about. Don't you wonder? How do we even know about the conversations between the prime minister and the publisher of the paper?
His name was Moses, I believe.
Yes, exactly. Noni Moses. How do we even know? So the story goes that Netanyahu's chief of staff, Ari Harrow, was under investigation of his own. That's got nothing to do with Netanyahu. Only he recorded those conversations between Netanyahu and Noni Moses, the publisher of Yediot Aharonot, because he was there. And he kept it on his laptop, the calls themselves. And when the police was looking through the material and his laptop, they stumbled upon those recordings. And this is how the story was born.
Amazing. All right, go to 4,000 now.
4,000 is where the bribery accusation is. 4,000 is the more intricate story where you have a businessman who controls 3 companies. He controls Bezek. This is the Alovich couple, Shaul Alovich. And he is in control of Bezek, the Israeli phone company. It's always been a pillar of Israeli telecommunications. It's been there for dozens of years. Yes, the satellite company, TV, and Walla, a popular news website in Israel. And what Alovich needs, he needs a merger promoted between Yes and Bezek so that they're considered to be one entity and he gets more money in his pocket. And he needed some regulatory issues pertaining to Bezek to make competition more difficult.
Yeah, so just let me mention, when you mention Yes is one of the 2 major television providers in Israel.
Correct. Very true. Satellite TV. Yep. Yes is satellite TV, like DirecTV here. And what happens is that some of the competition and reform in the communications market would cost Alovich a lot of money. So he needed to put off that competition and allow Bezek to maintain its semi-monopoly, so that it was the only one that could use its own infrastructure rather than allow their cables to be used by their competitors, thus bringing the cost of the market down for the ordinary Israeli. And in this case, the prosecution is describing a situation where the couple, and by the couple I mean Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu, pass on orders to Alovich either directly or through intermediaries. Some of them have agreed to testify against Netanyahu, like his former spokesperson, Nir Hefetz, and ask them to direct the story in a certain way. Use this word in the headline, choose this photo. I need you to take this story down, put the story up. And it was especially crucial during times of elections. If you think about 2015, when you had the elections going through, this was a significant move vis-a-vis millions of viewers, including that famous video of the Arabs are running in droves to the ballot, if you remember that.
Okay, we have such little time left. I just want, bottom line, the trial is on hold right now. Do you expect it? What do you expect to happen? I just want the bottom line here.
Bottom line, it's not on hold. It's moving forward. The first session already ended with the indictment. Second one is set for July. The initial phase will take anywhere between 6 months to a year. The entire thing is expected to take place at the district level between 2 to 3 years, at which point it's going to move on to the Israeli Supreme Court for appeal. So you're talking about the process of 3 to 4 years. And how is the coalition going to handle that?
By the way, that's what we will deal with next time. Shahar, it is always wonderful to have you with me, and thank you for sharing your understanding of a very complicated issue. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha. We will continue to talk, you and I, off camera, and then you'll join me again very soon. And thank you for doing your own In the News. You are wonderful on JBS. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. Always a pleasure.
The insights of Shahar Azani, always a marvelous source of information about the Israeli scene. So my friends, please keep in mind that if there's a mazel tov in your family, or a family member or friend whose name you'd like read for a Misha Berach, or if there's a yortzeit coming up and you have no synagogue setting in which to read the name, please send me your simchas and your names. I'll be honored to read them on Gam Yachad here on JBS. Information should be emailed to jbscommunity@jbstv.org. If you'd like to be in touch with me directly, it's Rabbi Golub at jbstv.org. My thanks as always to our director, Sloan Copeland. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Stay safe and be well, my friends.